Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to join, and do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi. We've disabled the chat feature as we've discovered it can cause problems for some people using screen readers. So I'm just going to leave it a few moments for more people to arrive, and then we'll get started. I see lots of you joining. Glad you could make it today. Hello, Rodri from the University of Reading. Okay, I can see lots more of you have joined. So we're going to start the webinar now. So hello and welcome to today's webinar on the higher education public sector update, which is about winning hearts and minds for accessibility at the University of Cambridge. My name is Annie Mannion and I'm Digital Communications Manager at AbilityNet, and I'll be running you through what you can expect from today's session. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, live captions are on the webinar provided by MyClearText. So thank you, Kate, from MyClearText. You can turn them on using the closed caption option on the control panel. There are also additional live captions via streamtext.net, and slides are available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet and on our website at /HE update DEC 2020. If you have any technical issues or you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email with the recording, the transcript and slides. That should be on Thursday afternoon. And also, depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. Some of you already have. So if you want to ask the speakers any questions, do drop those in the Q&A area for us to address later on, or after today's session. We'll do a follow-up blog on our website. My colleague Sarah will be helping to answer your questions as well in the Q&A area. And finally, we also have a feedback page you'll be directed to at the end. So if you could tell us about any future topics you'd like us to cover in your webinars, that would be great. So please do let us know. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with AbilityNet, we support people of any age living with any disability or impairment to use technology to achieve their goals at home, at work and in education. And we do this by providing specialist advice, services, free information resources like this webinar, and I'll share a little more about our services at the end of the webinar. Okay. So today we're joined by Katey Hugi, who is a digital learning accessibility coordinator at the University of Cambridge. And she's been working on engaging staff with making accessibility improvements. And she's got some superb tips for you to take away. And then also we're joined by AbilityNet's Service Delivery Director, Amy Lowe. And she was going to provide an update on the public sector body's accessibility regulations and how the government's monitoring compliance so far. And she'll also share some tips to remember for video accessibility. So before Amy kicks off today's webinar content, I'm just going to start with a poll. And so we just launched the poll. So can you tell us, what do you feel is the focus of effort around accessibility at your university post the public sector web regulations deadline, which was back in September? So answer 1 is a high level of focus on embedding change and inclusive practice. Answer 2 is working through compliance focused actions. Answer 3, focus seems to have diminished, but some positive activity is happening. Well, answer 4 feels like the project has been closed with minimal future planning. So depending on how you joined the webinar, you may find you can't see the poll, but you can respond in the Q&A panel. So I'll just leave it a few more moments for everyone to respond. I can see just less than half of you have voted, so I'll give it a bit longer. Okay, nearly going to end the poll now. So sharing the results, I can see that we've got 20% say there's a high level of focus on embedding change and inclusive practice. The majority is 50% of you working through compliance focused actions, which is great. Focus seems to have diminished, but some positive activity is happening. That was 21% of you, and then feels like the project has been closed with minimal future planning. That's 9% of you. So just going to stop sharing the poll now. And I think Amy has got some further information about compliance and the government digital service in her section now. So over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Annie. Afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all really well. I can't actually believe it's already 2 months since the September deadline. I don't really know where that time's gone, and now we're actually in December, which is quite unbelievable. I don't know where this year's going. So this is just a short update from me on the regulations, and it's interesting to see the results of the poll, and really encouraging to see that, you know, broadly the majority of institutions on the webinar today have still are still focusing and driving that whole piece forward. And certainly I think a lot of us knew that the deadline was almost a starting point for where we would start executing some of the actions around compliance. But it's also really good to see a good proportion of institutions in that that first option saying that they're focusing on culture change and embedding inclusive practice. So be great to hear how you're all getting on with that. As far as the GDS side of things are concerned, the monitoring continues, and we checked in with them around when, I think there was a question on the last webinar about when they're going to publish some findings, and they're expecting to publish some initial findings in the new year. Their general feedback so far is that most sites that they've looked at do have some issues, as you would expect, but the response that they've been getting when they've contacted people to fix them has been really positive. So broadly, it seems like the monitoring is achieving what it should be, which is brilliant. I asked one of the monitoring team if there was anything in particular they wanted me to feed into this group in terms of specific areas of focus. And they highlighted some areas that are worth keeping a close eye on, making sure that sites are tested routinely as new things are added. So things like cookie notices, coronavirus page updates and sections and so on. And also remember to keep your accessibility statement up to date. It's quite astounding how fast a year goes by, as I was saying earlier. So it's good to have a reminder in to check that over and progress the outstanding items, and just have reviews in the diary and some clarity around who's keeping an eye on it. Another comment when we were talking to the team was that they wanted they wanted us to communicate that the spirit in which they're conducting the monitoring is very much to help people to reach a place of compliance, and definitely not seeking to catch people out on technicalities. So, you know, some of the key things they're looking for is a nice, clear, user-friendly accessibility statement with contact details that work, and a responsive team fixing issues, rather than, you know, looking to find the precise wording from the example statement. But they will, of course, point out any issues that they do spot and give advice on how to rejig as needed. So just moving on to the next slide. On the topic of giving feedback, some of you may have seen this survey circulated by the lovely Kelly from JISC last week. GDS are running a survey to get a feel for where public sector bodies are with their compliance and what might be standing in their way. So if you could all please take the time to fill this out and share any challenges that you're facing in getting ongoing traction and investment in this area. And hopefully GDS will be able to respond to that. So moving on to the next slide. Whilst I have you, I wanted to just quickly zone in on an area that people have been finding particularly challenging, which is the topic of video accessibility. And again, we've been chatting this over with the GDS representatives at the Digital Accessibility Working Group, and just wanted to share a few thoughts on this. Again, some attendees may recognise some of this from some excellent summary information that's been come out from Kelly and John at JISC recently. So the compliance story is quite straightforward. According to WCAG 2.1, all pre-recorded media must comply. And, you know, GDS has communicated that it interprets the web content accessibility guidelines as defining appropriate captions being checked and edited for accuracy and containing all the meaningful content from the audio. But obviously in the HE sector, it is clear that the amount of video content that's being produced with lecture recording, etc., does make it challenging to keep on top of video accessibility right across the piece. But just because you can't do everything, it's really important not to just, you know, do nothing in this area. So firstly, only video published on or after the 23rd of September 2020 is in scope of the regulations. And from a compliance perspective, if you can't achieve full compliance at this moment in time, you would need to make a costed disproportionate burden claim. But this does also require a mitigation plan. And this is where you can include things around prioritization planning and strategy, alternatives available and support available for students. So there's a number of different ways to focus your prioritization, maybe looking at the most widely used media, the most important media that might be more pertinent to disabled students than other media. And certainly there's some brilliant best practices where people are going about checking captions for accuracy, including using students who are on the course to review and amend, which is a great way to cement their learning, and also using transcripts to be able to quickly spot the issues and go back along and correct those. So this is just a very quick whiz through this topic. I'm reliably informed that JISC are in the process of pulling together some detailed guidance on this, which I've included a link on this slide where that guidance will be published. I think it's due to be published in the next week or so. So I just wanted to share that link for your use. So I think that's more than enough from me. So over to Katey for some accessibility storytelling, the confessions of an accessibility specialist.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, I'm Katey Hugi. I am the Digital Learning Accessibility Coordinator for the University of Cambridge Judge Business School. And prior to that, I was at the University of Cambridge Clinical School. It's Hugi, it's Hug with an I. It's how I introduce myself as I come in the room because nobody knows how to spell it. For those who can't see me, I'm a 44-year-old woman. I have extremely long hair at the moment. I'm growing it to have it cut for the Little Princess Trust to make wigs for children with cancer. And I always have a mischievous grin on my face. So if you can't see me, you can probably picture me now. Okay, so...
Sorry, Katey, sorry, just to interrupt. We've just had a message saying that your audio is quite tricky to hear. I don't know if there's any way of adjusting.
It's still going. Okay, apologies, everybody. I will try again. I haven't actually moved. I sat there quietly, Annie. Is that any better? Is that any better?
Yeah, and if you can just speak up, that okay. Might help.
All right, I'll speak up. If not, I'll refer back to my normal sound. We're trying the mic to get it better.
Okay.
Is that better? Good. Okay. So back in, I think it was about January, February time, I was talking to Annie, and we were talking about ideas, and she invited me to come and talk about hearts and minds, because I've done a lot of work within the clinical school to implement accessibility, not just to fix the issues there, but actually to change the culture, so that accessibility is an integral part of what we've been working on. New slide, Annie. Okay, so I'm a self-confessed chatter. So I work really well within a framework. So I've built our next session into different sections. So setting the scene, my approach to the first steps of engagement, scope, who are we trying to win the hearts of, virtual versus in person. So I've worked from home, and I've also worked in the buildings trying to win minds. And I think you have to have some successes and some losses in order for that to work. Then I'm going to talk about the impact. I'm going to let you into the secret of what has broccoli got to do with accessibility. And then I'm going to look, as a conclusion, some simple next steps for you. These are just ideas. It's really important to me that you fill up the Q&A with your questions. This is your time. 20 minutes are going to go really, really quickly, okay? And so I'm looking forward to the Q&A session at the end of it, okay? So next slide, please. Okay, introductions. So this is it. This is your time. I give you permission to pause now and listen to my stories. Forget about the meeting you've just come from. Forget about the meeting that you're going to. This is your time, and I want to make it as valuable as possible. So we're going to start with a poll, and Annie's going to run that for me.
Okay, yeah, just going to launch the poll now. So what is the thing you always start with when discussing accessibility for the first time? Is it answer one, the WCAG guidelines? Is it the alt text? Legal implications of not being accessible? Transcripts and captions, or other? If you can put your other suggestions in the Q&A box, that would be great. Again, depending on how you've joined, you may find you can't see it, but you can respond in the Q&A panel. I'll give you a few moments. Okay. See the answers coming in. Just over half of you have voted, so just a few more moments to engage with the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now, and sharing the results. We can see that 21% of you say WCAG guidelines, 8% alt text, 19% the legal implications of not being accessible, 16% transcripts and captions, and then 36% other. So just to look at some of the suggestions you've put in there. We usually start with the 4 principles. Some of the benefits of inclusive and accessible practice. Just a kind of straightforward one, which is a really good point, why it's important. So I'm just going to stop sharing now. Okay.
Okay, so Anne, is that okay?
Yeah,
okay.
great.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it's this bit is all about starting places. How do we use the best of our time with that first contact with that person? Whether it's in a building, you're in the tea room and you're having a chat, or whether you're on virtual meeting and you've got a few minutes to turn around. What I've observed is there's a direct relationship between how I start that first meeting. And what I've learned, that rather than starting with a tell, a WCAG, a guideline, or benefits, which are all fantastic, I start with a listen, and I actually change the question around to tell me what you already know about digital accessibility. And when I start with that, when I start with tell me about it, I find out your own personal connection to accessibility. You might have wonderful digital skills, but you don't know how it applies to accessibility. You might have a family member who has an impairment that you can relate to. I tend to talk about the fact that I had epilepsy when I was younger and I grew out of it, and I can share that experience with somebody. But once I've listened to what they've said, then I can go on to selling those benefits, setting the scene. Those are my, what we're going to talk about is setting the scene at the beginning. When I start with a tell, sometimes I can see people's body language actually changing because they've switched off. It feels like I'm overwhelming them with more information. I'm not selling the benefit. So there's just something to think about that I found in over the last 18 months that I've been working on this. Just that initial change makes a massive difference. And then I tend to have long-term relationships with the people I've made contact with. The new slide, please, Annie. So learnings from setting the scene. Do the admin for them. Bring solutions, not issues. This is a really good tip. When I meet somebody and I've had that initial chat at the tea room, I've caught them. There's not many people can get away from me in the tea room. I've even been known to go downstairs at conferences and be around at the break time to bump into somebody. I can say, oh, I've set up a meeting for you, just half an hour, and then we can do some training later. Rather than sending the message, it sounds obvious, but rather than sending the message, when are you free, book something in, because then they can change it or they can attend it. Pause and be in the room. I gave everyone permission at the minute to pause. In our virtual environment that we're in, expect people to be late. Okay, in half an hour, I would say I've got 10 minutes to win you over. The first 10 minutes you would have run in, you've probably not had lunch, probably not had a drink, and someone's knocking at the door because we're at home now. I've got 10 minutes then to talk about our information, and then you're thinking about your next meeting. So pause and be in the room, give people permission, and don't be afraid to rearrange. I've had people come in who are rushed, and you can just see they're not in the right frame, the mindset for discussing accessibility. Be nice, be kind, and say, I'll rearrange it. Because next time you can guarantee they'll be in the room and they will listen, because they will feel bad that they didn't have that meeting before. Start with listening. What do you know about digital accessibility? And every time I ask that question, I learn more. I had a very similar question happen to me yesterday, and I learned a colleague has a difficulty hearing out of their left ear. And we talked about live captions, and we talked about all these amazing things. I now know I've got somebody in that team who's going to support me when I start talking about digital accessibility. Share your accessibility vision. This is quite key. And again, it's the same with any project. But right at that beginning, when you've had that first bit, you've asked what their connection to accessibility is. You then very quickly should be able to say, what are you trying to achieve? So I don't tell them how I ended up working there and what I've been doing and all these other things, which used to be my tendency. I now say, we are looking for ownership on the maturity model. So if any of you have come across the AbilityNet, the maturity model with Alistair Renault, it's valuable to me because I can point in the direction of something that's recognised and say, we are looking for ownership. Go and have a look at that. You can then also talk about the benefit to them. So what are the benefits? I'm going to save you time. I want to encourage you to learn more about digital accessibility so you can tell other people. But I also want to share with you that this is going to save you time. I want to get your interest. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, because there's a fine line between sort of nagging and saying that you've got to do accessibility and actually going, this is awesome. This is going to make your work and your content so much. Provide clear expectations and test theirs. We're going to talk, within about scope, but be clear what you're doing. Are you actually going to do the work, or are you going to help them do the work? There is a tendency for people to go, brilliant, we've got a digital accessibility coordinator. You can fix our 3,000 documents to make sure we're compliant. be okay with saying, I'm not going to fix all your documents to make them inclusive. What I actually want you to do is to build and design learning content with accessibility in mind, because it's going to keep changing. Who thought we'd all be on Zoom every day or Teams every day, you know, a year ago? So now you need to have people with their mindset around, I'm not learning a checklist. I'm learning principles that I can apply. I can identify the principles, I can apply the principles, and I can future learn. I can sustain this. And for me, things like my clear expectations is the badging. So we were lucky enough to sit in on the pilot with AbilityNet and in Alistair McNaught. And we were looking at how you assess and evaluate your whole organisation for accessibility. And again, that's been really, really useful. So it's worth looking into that side of things if it's helpful to you too. Next slide, please, Annie. Okay, so scope. So who are you trying to win the hearts of? I actually had to look up the saying, winning hearts and minds of, because it's not something I use all the time. And I was thinking, what is a heart? What's a mind? So a heart is that you're passionately trying to, on a personal level, get somebody's interest into something. And the mind is the facts, the figures. How do I strategically get somebody to want to invest in what you're doing? So we're going to start with a poll. So we're going to go, Annie, could you do a poll for me, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So this poll is, who do you think is your main stakeholder for encouraging accessibility improvements? Is it university staff? Is it students? Or the dean and senior management team? Finance directors, administrators, or other? Again, please share in the Q&A box. Okay, just over half of you have voted, so just a few moments for everybody who'd like to engage with the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. And you can see that 27% say university staff, 31% say students, 27% the dean and senior management team. Nobody has said finance directors, 4% administrators, and then 12% said other, which includes everybody, of course, yeah. Academic staff, all of the above, whoever can help the change happen. Yeah, everybody has a responsibility, some of the other suggestions. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay, I think that is a wonderful thing, that poll, because it does show that it is everybody, you know, everybody. Financial directors, they're the ones who are going to give you budgets if you've got to get captions and transcripts in or transcribers in. They're the ones who are going to make sure that some people within your school, university, higher education can go on an IAAP qualification course, so that you've got ambassadors within your school. So everybody's involved. But also, I just wanted to point out a project management trick, if you like. By far my greatest asset whenever I do a project of how to get hold of a stakeholder and pin them down is personal assistants, custodians, receptionists, people in the canteen. They are my eyes and ears. You can't be everywhere, but they know when people are in, they know the connections between teams, they know work patterns, they also know how approachable people are. And the other thing to know is that stakeholders know this too. So if you've sent an invite to somebody and they haven't met you before, they might ask somebody they know, like the reception, say, oh, have you heard of the Hugi? Who's the Hugi? Oh yeah, she's all right. She says she says hello every morning. She's fine. You've got through the door. you can't see every connection within a university. Somebody might be a brother, a sister, a sibling, or they do sports together. Everybody, you know. If we go to the next slide, Annie, if I expand on that a bit, list your stakeholders. I have a formal stakeholder management plan because I have to share it to my key steering group, but have your own list. Something that became quite humorous in the clinical school was it was called the Hugi hit list. If you were on the hit list, I was coming to help you, give you information. I was going to give you tools and techniques. But if you were on that hit list for too long, I was going to hassle, intimidate, and threat. You know, it became this running joke that if you're on the Hugi's hit list, she was coming to get you. But it had a ripple effect. People liked it. It was humorous, you know, so don't be afraid to put in a bit of humour. But stay professional. Offer help, but stay within your scope. Scope creep is quite a dangerous thing that can happen. So often if I found somebody with, say, 100 documents, I would say, do you know what? Let's work on 5 together. You don't need to learn the same lesson 100 times. I'll help you with the other ones, but you prove to me that anything that you do from now on is going to be accessible because you get the principles. So that's my suggestion to you. Virtually, it's been amazing. The receptionist that I have has become a dear friend at the Judge Business School. It turns out when I had that listening conversation, they've got a degree in special educational needs, and they've been able to help me no end with approaching people virtually, sitting at home. All the way from March, I've managed to get contact. So it's been a fabulous thing. But yeah, get your hit list and have fun with that. So new slide, please. So we're doing okay with time. I'm going to keep going through. Annie, I think we're okay. So I've got another couple of sections. This is the section with most information that I think would be helpful to you, and then we can build on it in the Q&A. So winning hearts and minds virtually, winning hearts and minds in person. It's without a doubt that the physical world is my natural playground. I love networking with people and chatting. I get a real buzz from sharing accessibility with people and going, did you know about that? You could do that. Yesterday, I found out about Control-Alt-1 does an instant header style. That saves somebody a load of time. I won that person over with that. So in the virtual world, I think, attending conferences, attending training sessions, and even getting just 5 minutes on the agenda really, really helps. When I first spoke to Annie and Amy, I gave them the example of I had somebody who was very nervous about learning new things. And I spent a lot of time listening to her, and I worked through the basic principles of accessibility because we have a list that we work on derived from the WIGAG guidelines. And I was walking down the corridor one day and she came running towards me, and I thought, oh my goodness, she doesn't look very happy. And actually she was ecstatic. She said, I've just done my first meaningful link. And it was just a goosebump moment. And that in the physical world happens a lot. You make it easier and happy for people, and then they share it with someone else. I had one person, we use our NVDA or JAWS or Narrator, our built-in screen readers, shared it with one person, and she put the screen reader on for a week for all her work to understand what other people were going through and assessing the pages on our virtual learning environment. She shared that with me. I then had my anecdote to tell other people. I've had quite a few like that. In the physical world, though, you do have people who will just come in the office. And you probably all had it yourself. They've got their arms folded. I'm not doing this. This is more work. I don't need to do this. What I would say to you is just remember, it's probably nothing to do with you or what you've said. There might be something going on outside of that office environment that has made that person struggle. So when I talk about you should have successes and losses, turn that loss into something positive. So that person who started saying, no, I don't want to do it, sit down, I talk, and then we find, well, okay, the next step is you're not going to change 150 pictures on your presentation 9 o'clock the night before. But the next presentation you do, you can use a slide master template, which has already got it set up. Most of the accessibility issues have been sorted. So the word approach is really key. Networking in the virtual world. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work, but I have met so many people virtually now. Just remember those things from above, the scope, listen. In the virtual world, I have just one meeting a daily catch-up, but then I have that half an hour meeting. So can I have half an hour just to talk to you about accessibility? I send the invitation out, and you know, I can set up drop-in sessions. I can set up formal training, whatever that person needs. And the positive of doing things virtually is that we're really well behaved virtually. We turn up on time generally. We mute. You imagine in an office being able to mute. I'm not sure if that will happen when we go back into the real world. There are real positives from the virtual world. I started this job in March, and I've been in the building once in all that time, and yet we've made a big impact. So if you go to the next slide then, please, Annie. So virtual versus in person, what have we learned? So I have my anecdotes all the time. I have all these stories that I love sharing, and I make people laugh. But I do take my professionalism seriously and my integrity. But there's nothing wrong with a bit of humour. I have my toolkit ready. I have a list of really good links. AbilityNet is one of the first places I point to when somebody says, I can't meet you yet. I go, okay, go and watch this video and I'll book a meeting in. Oh, and listen to a TED talk and then come and see me. So I've already got them in, you know, I've already got them in the room. I can see Annie smiling because she knows that I do send them to that flip learning. Share the benefits to them. Don't overwhelm. What we're just trying to do is okay. Even identifying an issue or a barrier is progress. You could sit back and plan forever and not get anything done, but if you just make that start, that's a benefit to somebody, and it's a really positive thing. Share your vision. So my vision for the Judge Business School is we will have ownership of this. We are changing culture, and we will be able to identify issues, apply the principles, and sustainably make sure that our learning content is inclusive. Once you see accessibility, you can't unsee it. This is a quote somebody said to me, and I thought it was brilliant. It's true. Once you see a meaningful hyperlink, I can't unsee it. You know, you can't unsee something with a color contrast that isn't quite right. And when people point it out to you, you know that you've had the right impact. Celebrate the successes and turn the losses in positives. Let's just see what you can actually achieve with somebody said no, what can you do with it? But on the flip side of that, if you've got somebody really passionate and they're frustrated that accessibility isn't daily part of what we do, make it a tangible action next. Ask them to work on something specific to keep that focus, and build an environment where it's okay to talk about disability. That's something. So the broccoli effect. So Annie, if you could, this is my last section. We're just a little bit over, but we're okay. The broccoli effect. I wish I could see everyone's faces, whether you're confused or amused. What has broccoli got to do with accessibility? So in a virtual world, I have a team catch up every day, or we did have back in March. One particular day, I was in 3 meetings with the 2 same gentlemen throughout the whole day. And every one of those meetings, I was talking about accessibility. So by the afternoon, these poor chaps had heard me talk about it for hours. And I made a comment and said, oh, you must be really fed up of me talking about this now. I know, I should just give you a word that if you say the word, I will stop talking about accessibility. You know, broccoli. And broccoli stuck. At the same time, the graphic designer put behind him a big broccoli, and then there was broccoli on documents and broccoli here and broccoli there. We told the team about it. Then it moved on to broccoli awards. The point of it is, don't be afraid to inject a little bit of humour, because it still has the ripple effect. So we're going to go to the next slide. There's only a couple more slides. Our team did a big review of the Michaelmas term. And for those who can't see the slide, it's built up of lots of post-it notes with lots of comments. I've inked the comments out because they're, you know, part of the team. I wasn't in that day. And so I came back to look at it thinking I can gauge how well I'm doing with it, accessibility. There was one post-it note saying, "We love broccoli." And my heart sank, because I thought, I haven't achieved the impact I wanted virtually. I just haven't been able to do it. But my point to you is, you will never see the ripple effect of what you're doing. It's all down to perspective. So next slide, please, Annie. When I zoomed out of the Miro board, I saw that broccolis engulfed the whole of every aspect of the review. It proved to me that accessibility was an integral part of our design. I had made a massive impact. The astute people can see there's a dotted line from the middle, and there was like this 6-foot broccoli. I do take it seriously. I do take accessibility seriously, but I do absolutely, if you go to the next slide, Annie, I've been told I'm too serious at home often. Mummy's not very, mum's very serious, but have faith in the ripple effect. Go with the humour. Don't feel you need to apologise for talking about accessibility, because that's where it came from. This is where the broccoli came from. You don't know, they might be a fan of it. It's all down to perspective. You are having an impact. So conclusions very quickly. Annie, thank you. Everyone makes a difference. Absolutely everybody. Start by listening. Clear, concise, consistent message. So that includes the badging schemes that are available. So AbilityNet, the maturity model. Okay is okay. Even identifying a barrier is progress. You want to inspire, not overwhelm. So my next step to you is, what is the one thing you've been putting off? So at TechShare Pro last week, it was fabulous. It was just amazing. And one of the things that came out of it, stop procrastinating. Don't apologize for accessibility. Knock on that CEO's door. Who have you got to see next? Send the email out. Blame it on the Hugi. Say it was the Hugi said that I've got to send this message. I've got your back. So is everybody else. But go and do it. So Annie, the very last slide. You are making a difference. Thank you for listening to my ideas and thoughts. I couldn't possibly get everything in 20 minutes. You are awesome. And what you're doing is fabulous. Thank you, Annie.
Well, thank you. And yeah, some excellent ideas for others to take away and try out. So thank you, Katey. So I'm sure you've all got a lot of questions you'd like to ask Katey and Amy. So if you have a question, please fire away in the Q&A box. I doubt we'll manage to cover everything right now, so we'll capture any unanswered questions on our website in the next couple of days. So just looking at the questions that come through, we have a question for Katey. In what team do you sit? Who funds the post? Is it full-time? And what was the driver for the post? Can you share a bit of background information?
Yeah, of course. And who was that? Sorry, that was
Sue Onans.
Thank you, Sue. That's a really good question, actually. I will be forever grateful to William Mayer at the Clinical School of Medicine. He was the person who set up, it was a 9-month project at the clinical school. He absolutely believes in accessibility and put forward the business case for it. They had choices. They could have got people in to fix documents, interns, and it was all discussed, but he was very clear that actually it was better to have a dedicated role. I'm very much aware that this is a brilliant opportunity, because often accessibility is just a plug onto your role, and it's very difficult to make massive change when you've got very limited time and resources. The judge contacted me as I was coming to the end of the clinical school work. And again, it was a 9-month contract, which is coming to an end very soon. So I'll be looking for more opportunities, and I would really love to continue the work that I'm doing within the university. And so at the moment, to answer it specifically, it's a dedicated project role. It's funded within the digital learning team. So it's to do with the virtual learning environment. So it's very much on learning content. And a business case was put forward. So that's how it's funded.
And a sort of follow-up question from that, which is from Fiona Strawbridge. She'd be interested to know how many Kateys there are at Cambridge.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, there's only one Hugi, but there are lots of Kateys. It's something that I've taken upon myself. I've made contact. We've got over 31 colleges and schools. And so whenever I hear about a bit of accessibility in a particular school or area, I make a contact. So I've now got a network of accessibility ambassadors, but actually we call each other the accessibility ninjas, which I thought was original until TechShare Pro. I've realized Microsoft have accessibility. If Microsoft can be humorous, we can be humorous. There are very limited roles in accessibility at the moment, but it's expanding, and I can't talk for the whole of the university. I know that there's wonderful push from different schools all over, and I'm all the time learning. Yesterday I met another 2 within a particular area in the school that are working on it, and we're building together this wonderful network of resources and helping each other. Because there's no point doing the same thing, going through those same learning curves, when you can share it with somebody. It's not a competition. We're all making a difference. And of all things that could go across different schools and different colleges, this is it. Yes, so there's more Kateys. I haven't met them all yet, but I'm finding them.
Well, the next question is from Adam Bailey. He says, your enthusiasm and positive approach is really clear. How do you sustain engagement after your first approaches?
Brilliant question. Thank you, Adam. I love that one. Like I said, I'm a chatter, so I have a framework, and every time I do another meeting, I do incremental changes of how I approach it, which has left me to the point where I am now. I have 3 meetings. The reason before, I used to do it open-ended. I come and help you, I come and help you. And then you end up sitting next to somebody for 6 weeks and you end up sitting with them, and that's not helpful to anyone. So I make it very clear and concise. You have 3 meetings with me. The first one is the introduction, which is that half an hour that I talk about. And that's the first is listen, tell me. I've done it with Amy, I've done it with Anu. They know I sat and said, right, what do you do? Then it's a follow-up, which is already booked at the same time. You press the button as soon as somebody, I've been told I'm dangerous because I've booked the meeting before the meeting ends, if you see what I mean. I've got the follow-up there. Outlook, if you use Outlook, is wonderful because within it you can have content, and I have an agenda set up in there so people know what you're going to do. The next engagement is about the basic principles. There's no way everybody is going to remember everything at once, but somebody will be interested in videos, and somebody will be interested in Word, and somebody will be interested in Excel. If you've got it in that next meeting, that's when you can encourage somebody. So the next one is the basic principles. And then the third one is optional. The third one is called the approach meeting. So on the poll, do you remember where it said it didn't have many administrators? They're actually a key stakeholder, because although they upload that information, they might have 10 academics or faculty producing that content. And it's that individual administrator that needs to coach the academics to say, you need to make your stuff more accessible. I can help you. And then you can say, don't worry, Hugi's got my back. When the academics say, I haven't got time for this, you say, go and have an approach meeting. So I always say 3 meetings. First one, introduction. Second one is basic principles, actually working on a document. And third one is an approach. How do we get past that no? Or how do we get past that over enthusiasm? I want to take on the world. Do the next 3 steps. And then once I finish that one, I have EDX have got an amazing introduction to accessibility online course, but at the end of it, I acquired what they said and I've adapted it. Knowledge is power. There's so much information out there. Just go and join GIS, look at AbilityNet, watch a video, choose one thing. Second thing, take one step at a time. Maybe start doing alt text or meaningful text. Second one, people first. It's about people. Go and talk to your friends, go and talk to your family and understand. I haven't even mentioned, I can't believe I haven't mentioned my brothers yet. I've got 5 brothers and they are all my personas. So we have one brother who's colour deficient, one brother who's dyslexic. I've got one brother who uses a wheelchair. You know, I talk about experiences. So I definitely have this structure, and every time I just refine it just a little bit more. So once you're on my hit list, you know what's going to happen next. But thank you, that's a really good question.
Okay, we've got quite a few other questions for you, but I'm just going to ask Amy one of the questions that you may be able to answer. It's a question: does the GDS have specific testing guidelines for mobile apps?
So the success criteria for mobile apps is the same as desktop. So you use the WCAG 2.1 checkpoints. There are some you know, you'd use different testing tools for that. So obviously if you're testing on mobile, you would test using sort of voiceover or talk back, depending on which kind of device you're using. I will, there is a page, I can't share, can I, pages, but there is a page on the W3C page about mobile accessibility, so we can share that in our roundup blog after the event, and we will inquire with GDS. The mobile apps don't come into scope of the regulations till next June, but it's definitely well worth getting ahead of the game on that. So we'll ask them how they're going to be monitoring mobile accessibility, but a lot of it is similar tests that you would do on a desktop.
Okay, and then there's a couple of questions that are similar for both of you to answer. I think one is from Lee Gowdy. Are there any specific qualifications needed, or is it more important to have a genuine interest and knowledge? And then there's another question from Peter Williams, who says, for those of us for whom this is part of our role rather than a full-time position, can you advise about any kind of accreditation pass or training that's available or on the horizon?
So just for Peter's question, the internationally recognised accreditation is the IAAP. So there's 2 levels. There's the CPAC and the WAS, which are, the CPAC's more of a general one. I think the Hugi is in the process of swatting up for that one. And that's broader sort of accessibility competencies, and the WAS is much more on the technical side, so good to work towards. There's quite a few really good online training sort of resources around digital accessibility, which again we could probably collect a selection together for the blog.
I would say it's a really good question, because obviously once I started working on this, it fit in with my previous background, what I've been working on, but I wanted to quantify what I was learning. And so I came across the IAAP, I came across AbilityNet's training as well online. There's a lot out there, but the EDX one is a really good, you can have it verified or not verified, and it's a good starter one if you're thinking about how much do I need to know, because the IAAP is fantastic, but you need to know the knowledge in order to complete.
And I think it's easy to get overwhelmed by knowledge around accessibility, but actually if you learn, I think it's the quick checks for accessibility will open up a whole new world where you can very quickly identify accessibility challenges. So don't have this sense that you need to be a developer who knows how to code to be able to identify an issue on a website. Using your tab key is probably going to identify, you know, quite quickly some issues with sites. Would you agree, Katey, that to be able to demonstrate?
Because the people we're trying to influence is me as well. You know, I'm trying to learn new ways of making and learning content accessible. And I don't have all the answers. And what's wonderful about it is by being able to go on to your AbilityNet and JISC and all these other ones, you can test something and go, oh, I'm not sure if that really explains to me how I'm going to make that more inclusive. And so it can be overwhelming when you go on to the quick, you know, the whole the WGAG guidelines, but the quick principles and getting yourself used to it and testing your own work. You don't have to be highly technically trained to do that. And actually the people we're trying to influence won't know a HTML page, they know a web page. So your language and how you explain things are really important. So,
I think we've got time for just one more question before wrapping up. So this is again for both of you. A question from Meta. What would be your advice for working with disabled students and your advice for disabled students wanting?
Oh, you've frozen, Anne. Hang on, let's see if I can find that question.
I liked it. It was a good question. It was starting.
Yeah. Wanting to work with staff and push for change. Yes. So from my perspective, Meta, where I've seen this working well is where there are lots of opportunities for students to be drawn in and engage in things like course design, giving feedback, user testing, that kind of stuff. So it really is. Sometimes it's quite organisational driven, isn't it, Katey?
Yeah, and I think I've actually I listened to lots of webinars to get advice about this sort of you can overwhelm somebody with an impairment and say, come and test this, come and test this. What you need to do to start with is do your own basic tests, your own WAVE and ACT beta, you know, those sort of tests on your systems already, so that when you do introduce it to somebody with an impairment or a combination of impairments, you've already got rid of the obvious issues. So when you're working with somebody, you've taken some of those barriers away. So when you're talking to somebody with a disability and asking for their help, they can pick up on the things that are really important to them. I've had students contact me and say, I'd like to talk to you about my experience. And definitely the thing that I use that is diaries. As opposed to just reviewing a page, I say, give me a diary of how you've experienced our virtual learning environment, because we are just working on the virtual learning environment. How you've experienced it during the week, and I can pick up barriers and request, do you prefer Teams? Do you want me just to email? You know, ask the student how they prefer communicating.
I do think with students as well, it's about being aware of what you can expect and request from your institution, you know, and being confident to request that. For instance, things like having a really clear and easy way to report an accessibility barrier. Meta, I think you're from Disabled Students UK, aren't you? So groups like yours coming together to have that student voice and that, you know, empowering yourselves to sort of take.
I think it's important to note there's two different things going on here. We have a really fabulous dedicated digital disability resource centre, and we have access to census access, and we have various. What I'm trying to encourage is that day-to-day producing that learning content, you create it with accessibility in mind. And so there's a loop there. There's the trying to make learning content accessible and inclusive and helping a specific student. And there's the culture change of how we create our learning content. So they're slightly different. Hi Annie, you're back.
Hello. Yeah, I just got kicked out of the webinar, I'm afraid. So sorry about that. I hope you're okay to answer the question that I just posed.
We got pretty much to the end of the question, so that was good.
Okay, good. Yeah, you both froze for me, so I wasn't sure whether you could hear me or not. So
Yeah.
apologies.
All I was explaining is that I'm just dealing with the virtual learning environment. So our accessibility statement is based on that, and it's what we're working on, as opposed to the university, which has got over I think it's 2,700 websites or something like that. So I'm only on one aspect.
Well, thank you, both of you, and yeah, apologies for just not being in there for the last couple of minutes. But yeah, just looking at the time, it's time to end the webinar there. But thanks again, Katey and Amy. Some excellent
Right, you're
points.
welcome. Hopefully it was good for you. So.
Yeah, some great tips, and just a bit more information to share about AbilityNet that might be of interest to people that are watching. So we also run training sessions on digital accessibility, and you can find out more about those at abilitynet.org.uk/training. And we've got an exclusive 10% off discount code, which is 10 Cambridge, which is 10 Cambridge. And we've got a course actually coming up this week on how to produce accessible videos. So some of those points that Amy touched upon earlier. And then we've got some more courses coming up in the new year. Then we also have a newsletter where you can sign up for the latest announcements about digital accessibility at abilitynet.org.uk/newsletter. And then some services that are suitable for specific to higher education and further education and the public sector, which is available at /accessibility services. And then don't forget about our next free webinars at /webinars. The next session is this time next week, Tuesday, the 8th of December, when we're joined by Marlin Rigg of the Norwegian Digitalisation Agency. So that's all from me. And thank you, Katey and Amy, and everyone who's joined us. And we'll be in touch with you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye, folks.
Bye.